If you've ever lived in a house with a basement, you know the kind of door I mean. Heavy, painted over too many times, a knob that's cold no matter the season, the kind of door that makes you hesitate for half a second before you touch it, even when you have no reason to be afraid. Now imagine this. You're alone in the kitchen. The house is quiet. You're not thinking about ghosts or demons or anything supernatural. You're thinking about laundry, bills, tomorrow. And then you hear a knock from the basement door. One knock, then another, then a third. You do what any normal person does. You call out, "Hello?" expecting maybe a contractor, maybe a family member, maybe a neighbor being weird. But the voice that answers from the other side is yours. Not similar, not distorted. Your exact tone, your exact cadence, your exact little habit of swallowing before you speak. Like the door isn't separating you from a basement. Like it's separating you from a recording of yourself that knows what you're about to say. That's the moment this case stops being creepy and becomes a rule. Because the first note in the file isn't about cold spots or shadows or the smell of rot. It's a warning written by someone who had already tried the obvious thing. Do not open the basement door. They didn't write it because they were dramatic. They wrote it because they opened it once, and afterward they couldn't agree on what happened in the minutes that followed. Their security footage didn't match their memory. Their audio didn't match their mouth, and the house started doing something methodical, like it was testing which button inside a human being produces compliance, curiosity, responsibility, shame, fear, and then the worst one, your own voice. This case file begins with a rented house on a quiet street, a couple trying to renovate, and a basement door that stayed locked for 40 years. It ends with a simple question that you're going to feel in your bones long before you can answer it rationally. If something can knock back in your voice, how do you ever trust the sound of yourself again? The house was a rental listed as charming and full of character, which is what people say when the floors creak and the plumbing has opinions. Ethan and Paige moved in because it was cheap, close to work, and the landlord promised the basement was just storage. He even made a point of handing them 2 keys, one for the front door, one for the basement door. The basement key looked older than the rest. The metal was worn smooth in places like it had been held too tightly for too long. The first week, nothing happened. They joked about horror movies and the way the basement door sat at the end of the kitchen hallway like a throat. Paige kept a basket of cleaning supplies beside it. Ethan stacked boxes by the wall next to it. The door stayed shut, locked, normal. Then on a Tuesday night, while Paige was showering upstairs, Ethan heard 3 knocks from the basement door. Not from the walls, not from the pipes, from the door. The sound had direction. It had weight. It sounded like knuckles on wood. He walked down the hall, stopped in front of it, and did exactly what any sane person would do. "Hello?" The answer came immediately. "Hello." It was his voice. Same pitch, same tired rasp, same little upward inflection at the end like he wasn't sure he should have spoken. Ethan's stomach tightened so fast it felt like he'd missed a step on stairs. He laughed, because that's what people do when reality glitches. They try to make it social. They try to make it a prank. "Paige," he called loud. "Are you messing with me?" From the other side of the basement door, his voice answered again. Paige, not mimicking him this time, using him. Ethan backed up a step and stared at the doorknob like it might turn on its own. The house stayed quiet. The shower upstairs continued. The moment stretched long enough that he convinced himself it was a weird echo, a neighbor, a trick of sound. Then the door knocked again. One slow knock this time, followed by a pause, followed by 2 more, like someone practicing a pattern. Ethan didn't open it. He didn't even touch the knob. He walked away like you walk away from a dog you're not sure is friendly. Paige came downstairs 10 minutes later, hair wet, towel around her shoulders, and Ethan tried to tell the story casually. He failed. The fear leaked into his voice no matter how he phrased it. Paige frowned, walked straight to the basement door, and knocked once. Nothing. She knocked again, harder. Still nothing. She turned to Ethan with an expression that said he'd imagined it, and that was almost worse. Because now the house didn't just feel creepy, it felt selective. Ethan forced a laugh. Maybe it was the pipes. Paige shrugged, unconvinced but ready to move on, and that's when the basement door spoke without being knocked. In Paige's voice, soft and close like she was standing on the other side with her mouth near the crack. "Ethan?" Paige froze so hard her shoulders lifted. Ethan didn't answer. Paige didn't answer. The silence filled the hallway like water. Then the voice repeated. Still Paige's voice. Still gentle. Still perfectly wrong in the way it matched her. "Ethan, open the door." Paige's eyes went wide and she whispered, "That wasn't me." The basement key sat on the counter behind them, catching the kitchen light. Ethan stared at it and felt the first real temptation, the one the house was counting on. Open it and prove it. Paige grabbed his wrist, nails digging into skin. "No!" she said, low and sharp. "Don't!" The basement door knocked again. 3 knocks, calm and patient, like it had all night. And from the other side, using Ethan's voice, the thing behind the door said the sentence that turned their fear into a rule. "Good. You heard me." Paige pulled Ethan away from the basement door like she was dragging him back from a ledge. They stood in the kitchen with their backs to the counter, eyes fixed on that old painted wood, waiting for another sound that would prove they weren't losing it. Nothing. For a full minute, the house behaved. They stood over the paper like it might bite. Paige didn't touch it at first. She just stared at the handwriting because it was hers. Not similar, not close. Her exact pressure. Her exact habit of making the letter A slightly too sharp. The kind of detail that makes your stomach drop, because it means this isn't a generic mimic. It's intimate. Ethan finally picked it up by the corner and flipped it over. Blank. No bleed-through. No indentation from the marker. Just clean paper like the warning had never existed. Like the message had been displayed directly into their perception and then wiped away the moment it made contact. Paige took it from him, flipped it back again. The warning was there again. Do not open it. She flipped it over and back 3 more times, fast, like speed could force reality to choose one version. Each time, the ink appeared and vanished with perfect consistency. Ethan's phone screen still showed a flat audio line on the video, like the microphones had decided to stay out of it. That's when the basement door whispered, using Ethan's voice so softly it felt like it was inside the kitchen, not behind wood. "Better," Paige snapped. "Stop!" The door answered in Paige's voice, calm and obedient. "Stop!" Paige looked at Ethan with something like betrayal on her face. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because the house had just proven it could take her voice and use it against her with no effort at all. Ethan's mind did the thing minds do under pressure. It tried to solve. "Okay," he said, forcing himself into the tone he used for work meetings, the rational tone. "We don't open it. We ignore it. We call the landlord in the morning and get out." The basement door knocked once, slow. Then, in Ethan's voice, "You won't." Ethan's throat tightened. "What?" The voice repeated, still Ethan's voice, and this time it added the smallest human detail, a nervous little laugh Ethan hated about himself, a laugh he didn't make on purpose. "You won't," it said. "You'll want to know." Paige backed away from the door as if distance could keep her safe. She set the paper down on the table like it was evidence. Her hands shook, and she rubbed them on her jeans as if the ink had gotten on her skin. Ethan stepped into the hallway and looked at the basement key on the counter. He kept his eyes on it the way you keep your eyes on a knife. Then he noticed something that made his stomach drop again. The key ring had moved. It was only an inch from where it had been, but Ethan knew where he'd seen it last. It had been farther from the edge. Now it sat closer, the metal catching light like it wanted to be noticed. He didn't touch it. He went to the sink, turned on the faucet, then turned it off again, just to make a different sound in the house, to break the tension. The silence that returned felt heavier than before, like the building was listening for what he'd do next. Paige whispered, "We should leave tonight." Ethan nodded. "We will." As soon as he said it, the basement door spoke in Paige's voice, soft, almost affectionate. "We will." Paige flinched, like she'd been slapped. She covered her mouth with one hand and stared at the door like it was a face that had just smiled. Ethan grabbed his jacket, grabbed Paige's coat, and walked them both to the front door. He didn't announce it. He didn't want the house to hear the plan the way it heard everything else. The moment his hand touched the front doorknob, the basement door knocked 3 times again. Faster this time, urgent, like it had learned urgency is a lever. Ethan froze. Behind the basement door, Ethan's own voice spoke. Too close. If you leave, you'll come back. Ethan swallowed and forced his hand to turn the knob. The front door didn't open. Not locked. Not stuck. It simply resisted, like the latch was holding against a pressure that wasn't mechanical. Ethan tried again, harder, and the knob turned, but the door stayed put, as if the frame had decided to be a wall. Paige's breathing sped up. "Ethan," the basement door whispered in Paige's voice, right over her. "Ethan." Ethan stepped back from the front door, heart hammering, and the door swung open easily as soon as he stopped trying, like the house didn't want him to leave out of defiance. It wanted him to leave only when it allowed it. That realization changes the shape of fear, because now you're not trapped by a lock, you're trapped by permission. Ethan looked at Paige and forced his voice steady. "We're leaving. Now." They stepped onto the porch. The air outside was normal. Streetlights. A dog barking somewhere, a car passing at the end of the block. That normality almost made Ethan laugh with relief. Then the porch light above them flickered once, and their neighbor across the street, a man Ethan had spoken to exactly twice, opened his front door, stepped out, and looked directly at their house like he was responding to a sound only he could hear. He raised his hand in a small wave. Then, in Ethan's own voice, clear as a conversation, he said, "You shouldn't open it." Ethan's blood went cold. The neighbor's mouth didn't match the sound. His lips moved wrong, like the voice was being played through him, not spoken by him. Paige grabbed Ethan's arm hard. "That's you!" The neighbor's head tilted slightly, eyes fixed on the basement-level kitchen window, and he repeated, still Ethan's voice, "You shouldn't open it." Then he smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes, and went back inside without another word. Ethan pulled Paige down the steps and walked fast toward the sidewalk, refusing to look back at the house. He could feel it behind him like a gaze on his neck. They made it to the end of the driveway. The sound of knocking followed them anyway. Not from behind, not from the basement door anymore. From inside Ethan's chest like a memory trying to become a command. Knock, knock, knock. Paige squeezed his arm and whispered, terrified, "I can hear it too." Ethan stopped walking. He didn't know why. He just stopped, like his body had been instructed. He turned his head slightly and looked at the porch. The front door of the house was still open, and on the threshold, perfectly centered like a placed object, sat the basement key. Not on the counter, not where they left it. On the threshold, in the open air, waiting like an invitation. Ethan stared at it, and the basement door knocked again from inside the house, patient and calm. Then his own voice, from somewhere he couldn't point to, whispered the simplest, most dangerous sentence in the world. "Take it." Ethan stared at the basement key on the threshold like it was a living thing. The metal wasn't just catching the porch light. It looked warm, like it had been in someone's hand a second ago. Paige whispered, "Don't touch it." He didn't answer. His chest was still doing that internal knocking, 3 beats that felt like a command trying to become muscle memory. He took one step backward, testing whether distance would weaken it. It didn't. The knocking in his chest stayed perfectly timed, like a metronome set to a rule. Ethan turned away from the key and pulled Paige down the sidewalk. They walked fast, not running yet, because running makes a situation feel real, and part of the human brain will do anything to avoid that. Paige kept glancing back anyway, and every time she did, she flinched as if she'd touched a hot surface. They made it to the corner. The street was normal. A passing car, a porch TV somewhere, a couple laughing 2 houses down. Normal. And that was almost the worst part, because normal made Ethan want to believe they could outwalk it. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket. He hadn't felt it ring. He hadn't heard anything. Just the vibration, steady and insistent, like the house had found a smaller door. He pulled the phone out and saw unknown caller. He didn't answer. The call stopped by itself. Immediately, a voicemail notification appeared. No number, no transcript preview. Just a red dot like a little wound on the screen. Paige grabbed his wrist. "Don't play it." Ethan swallowed and didn't. He shoved the phone back into his pocket, and they kept walking. Behind them, from the direction of their house, a dog began barking. Not frantic, rhythmic. 3 barks, pause, 3 barks. The same knock pattern. Ethan's stomach tightened. Paige whispered, "It's training everything." They reached a small park with a bench and a streetlight. Ethan stopped under the light, forcing his body into stillness because motion makes you feel chased, and stillness makes you feel like you're choosing. He looked at Paige's face and saw the question she was afraid to ask. What if it follows us? Ethan tried to lie. It won't. At that exact moment from behind them, a voice said, gentle and familiar, "It won't." Paige jerked around. Their neighbor across the street was standing at the edge of the park, barefoot, wearing a robe, hands at his sides like he'd been placed there. His eyes were open wide, but empty in a way that made Ethan's skin crawl. When he spoke again, it was Ethan's voice, perfectly. "It won't," he repeated. "If you take the key." Ethan felt something cold slide down his spine. Paige backed up until her shoulder hit the streetlight pole. The neighbor's mouth didn't match the words. His lips moved late, like the sound was being played through him, not spoken by him. That lag made it worse than any scream. Ethan said low, "What are you doing?" The neighbor smiled without emotion. In Paige's voice, "Helping." Paige made a small sound like she'd been punched. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He didn't know who to be angry at. The neighbor? The house? Himself for listening? The neighbor took one slow step closer. "Take the key," Ethan's voice said from his mouth. "Bring it inside." Ethan stepped forward instinctively, protective, putting his body between Paige and the neighbor. The streetlight hummed overhead, then dimmed by a fraction, like someone had pressed a control and released it. The neighbor stopped moving. His head tilted slightly toward Ethan's pocket, toward the phone, like he could hear the voicemail waiting there. Then, in Ethan's own voice, the neighbor said the sentence that made Ethan's knees feel weak. "You already have it." Ethan's heart lurched. He reached into his jacket pocket with shaking fingers and pulled out a cold piece of metal, the basement key. He hadn't picked it up. He hadn't gone back. He hadn't even looked at it again after turning away. Yet it was in his pocket, like it belonged there. Paige stared at it and whispered, "No." The neighbor's smile widened a millimeter. In Ethan's voice, "Good." Ethan felt the internal knocking stop instantly, replaced by a sudden horrible calm. Relief. The kind of relief that makes you realize you've just done what it wanted. Paige grabbed Ethan's hand and tried to rip the key away. Ethan's fingers tightened around it without his permission. Lag. The neighbor spoke one last time, still using Ethan's voice, soft like advice. "It's easier if you cooperate." Then he turned and walked back toward their house, barefoot on the sidewalk, moving with the slow certainty of someone who knows exactly where he's going. Ethan stared at the key in his hand and felt the worst truth settle into place. The house didn't need to lock them inside. It could lock the key inside them. Ethan stared at the key like it was proof he'd already lost. The worst part wasn't that it had appeared in his pocket. It was that the moment it did, his body felt better. The pressure eased. The internal knocking stopped. Relief landed in him like a warm blanket, and he hated himself for wanting it. Paige snatched his wrist and forced his hand open. The key hit the pavement with a sharp clink. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the streetlight above them dimmed slightly, like the neighborhood had exhaled. Paige stepped back as if the air had changed. Ethan looked down. The key was gone, not kicked away, not rolled into grass. Gone, as clean as a cut. Paige's face drained of color. No. Ethan's pocket vibrated again. Not a ring, just a single hard buzz that felt like a notification designed to make you check. He reached in without thinking. Cold metal. He pulled the key out and stared at it in his palm. Same scratches, same worn edge, same weight. It hadn't returned to his pocket through physics. It had returned through permission. Paige grabbed his shoulders. "We need help. We need someone else here right now." She pulled out her phone and dialed 911 with shaking thumbs. The call connected, and for one breath, Ethan felt relief. Not the house's relief, human relief. Authority, procedure, a line to the outside world. A dispatcher answered. Paige started fast, stumbling over words. "We're at the park on Redfield. My neighbor is acting strange. Someone's in our house. There's this basement door. It's..." The dispatcher cut her off in a calm voice that made Ethan's stomach drop, because it wasn't the dispatcher's voice at all. It was Paige's voice. "Paige," it said, using her mouth sound perfectly. "Don't do that." Paige froze, phone pressed to her ear, eyes wide. "That's me." she whispered. The voice on the line continued, gentle, persuasive. Come home. Take the key. Open the door. Paige pulled the phone away from her ear like it burned. The screen showed an active call, but the number field was blank. No digits, no routing, as if the phone was pretending to be in conversation with nothing. Ethan took the phone from her and ended the call. The screen flashed once and a voicemail notification appeared instantly. One new message. Duration. Ebriaro. He didn't touch it. Paige didn't touch it. The notification remained, a red dot like a dare. Behind them, the park looked normal. Across the street, a teenager laughed with friends. A car rolled past. Nobody looked at them. Nobody felt the cold behind their eyes. That was the isolation trap. When a horror is invisible to everyone else, you start doubting your own responses, and doubt makes you prove. Paige grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him away from the streetlight. We go somewhere public, she said. A diner, a hotel, anywhere with people. Ethan nodded. He wanted the same thing. Witnesses, noise, the feeling of safety that comes from being one face among many. They started walking toward the main road. 3 steps in, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Then Paige's. Then the teenager across the street glanced down at his screen, frowned, and turned his head toward Ethan like he'd just heard his name. The teenager's lips moved. Ethan's voice came out. Take the key back. Paige stopped walking. Her grip tightened on Ethan's arm until it hurt. It's using other mouths, she whispered. Ethan kept moving anyway, faster now. He wanted distance from the house, distance from the park, distance from anything that felt like a stage. At the next intersection, the pedestrian signal clicked to walk, then immediately switched back to don't walk, then back to walk again. Like it couldn't decide what instruction would feel most convincing. Ethan felt a tug in his chest, subtle but real, like a hand pulling a string attached to his ribs. Home. Paige felt it too. He knew she did because she whispered furious, "Stop pulling me!" Ethan stared at the key in his palm and realized the ugliest part of the mechanism. It wasn't forcing their legs. It was offering them relief again, the promise that if they just go back and do the thing, the pressure will stop, the world will behave, the voices will return to the correct mouths. That's how you get people to walk into traps without dragging them. You make the trap feel like a fix. Ethan closed his fist around the key until the metal dug into his skin. We don't go back, he said, more to himself than to Paige. The key felt warm for a second, like it was reacting to being held. Then, from inside Ethan's closed fist, came 3 soft taps. Knock, knock, knock. Paige jerked away like she'd heard it in her own bones. It's inside you, she whispered. Ethan opened his hand. The key was gone. Paige's breath caught. Then the house across the street, a completely different house, a stranger's house, knocked 3 times from inside its front door, loud enough that Ethan felt it in his teeth. The front door opened a crack, and Ethan's own voice came out of that crack, calm and familiar. Bring it home. Paige grabbed Ethan's sleeve and pulled him back from the intersection so fast they almost fell. The stranger's door across the street stayed cracked open, just wide enough for the voice to leak out, just wide enough to make the whole moment feel like a trap you stepped into without noticing. Ethan's voice again, calm, patient. Bring it home. Ethan didn't answer. Paige didn't answer. They moved fast toward the main road where headlights and noise could drown a bad dream. They made it 2 blocks before they saw the first place that felt safe. A late-night diner. Bright fluorescent light, cars in the lot, people inside. Normal. Witnesses. Noise. The kind of place where a basement door can't possibly matter. They went in. The warmth hit them. The smell of coffee and grease. The dull buzz of conversation. Paige's shoulders dropped a fraction, and Ethan hated how close he was to relief. Relief is where you get careless. They slid into a booth near the back where they could see the entrance. Paige kept her hands on the table like she didn't trust what they might do if she let them disappear into her lap. Ethan kept his phone face down and didn't look at it. A waitress came over. Smile tired but real. You 2 okay? Paige started to speak, then stopped, because explaining it out loud felt like verifying it, like giving the house a bigger audience. Ethan forced a small lie. Yeah, just long day. The waitress nodded. Coffee? Paige nodded too fast. Yes, please. The waitress walked away, and for a moment the world behaved. Then the TV above the counter flickered. Not a glitch. A single clean frame of black, then back to the news. Most people didn't notice. Ethan did. Paige did. Their eyes met, and the fear came back like it had been waiting outside the diner door. Ethan's pocket buzzed. One vibration, then silence. Paige's phone buzzed too. No ringtone, no notification banner, just the physical insistence. Paige whispered, "Don't." Ethan didn't touch it. He stared at the tabletop and listened to the diner sounds like they were a life raft. Then a man at the counter laughed at something the TV anchor said, and the laugh turned into Ethan's laugh, the nervous little laugh he hated, coming out of a stranger's mouth like it belonged there. The man didn't react. He kept eating, still smiling, still normal. Only his voice had changed. "Take the key back," Ethan's voice said, casual, like advice you'd give a friend. Paige flinched so hard, her knee hit the underside of the table. Ethan's pulse hammered. He wanted to stand up and shout, but shouting would turn the diner into a stage, and stages make crowds, and crowds make pressure. Paige whispered, teeth clenched, "It's using anyone who can speak." The waitress returned with 2 coffees and set them down, and for a second Ethan's brain fixated on the cups, the steam, the heat, something normal to hold on to. The waitress looked at them and said, in Paige's voice, perfectly, "You should go home." Paige's face went blank with shock. The waitress smiled like she hadn't said anything strange, like the words weren't hers to own. Ethan's throat tightened. He forced himself to look at the waitress's eyes, just to confirm she was a person, just to convince himself this wasn't a hallucination. Her pupils were normal, but the way she held her smile felt rehearsed, like a mask that had been placed on her face for the moment she delivered a line. Ethan said, low, "Stop." The waitress blinked once, and in Ethan's voice she replied, "Stop." Paige pushed her coffee away like it was contaminated. "We can't stay," she whispered. "It'll keep doing this." Ethan nodded. He knew she was right. The diner was full of mouths, full of potential transmitters. If the house could hijack one voice, it could hijack 100. They stood up and walked toward the register, moving like people who didn't want attention. Paige kept her eyes down. Ethan kept his hands open, empty, visible. At the door, Ethan felt it again. The tug toward home. Not a thought, a pull in the body. The same way hunger pulls you to food. The same way sleep pulls you to bed. A basic urge with a single solution. Go back, fix it, open the door. The moment they stepped outside, Paige grabbed Ethan's wrist and held it like she was anchoring him. "Say it," she whispered. "Say you're not going back." Ethan tried. "I'm not going back," he said. His own voice came out, but the last word didn't sound like his. It sounded cleaner, flatter, like someone had edited out the panic. And from inside the diner behind them, multiple voices repeated it in a soft chorus, like a response to a call. "Going back." Paige's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "It's correcting us," she whispered. "It's correcting our words." Ethan looked down at his hand. Cold metal rested in his palm again. The basement key. He hadn't picked it up. He hadn't reached for it. It was simply there, like the world had decided the next step for him. And then, inside the key itself, 3 soft taps. Knock, knock, knock. Paige made a small, broken sound. "It doesn't want the door," she whispered. "It wants us to carry it." Paige didn't touch the key. She didn't even want to look at it. She stared at Ethan's closed fist like the metal could jump on its own. "We have to get rid of it," she said, voice tight. "Not hide it, not pocket it. Get rid of it." Ethan's throat felt dry. He had the same thought, but his body kept betraying him in small ways. His fingers kept tightening around the key like it was holding him, not the other way around. They walked fast toward the main road, away from the diner, away from mouths that could be borrowed. Paige kept glancing at people's faces as they passed, checking for that rehearsed smile, that delayed lip movement. Every time someone spoke loudly into a phone, she flinched. Ethan stopped near a storm drain at the curb. It was a deep iron grate with dark water far below, the kind of place you throw something when you want it gone and you don't want to watch it go. Paige said, "Drop it." Ethan opened his hand. The key lay there, harmless looking, and that was part of the cruelty. It was just a key, a normal object, The kind of thing that should not be able to change a room or borrow a voice or take ownership of your reflexes. Ethan lifted it over the grate. His arm stopped mid-motion. Not hesitation, lag. The delay between intention and movement stretched. And in that delay, his mind flooded with bargaining. If you throw it away, you'll never know what's behind the door. If you throw it away, you'll make it angry. If you throw it away, you'll lose the only thing that explains what's happening. Paige saw the freeze and grabbed his wrist, forcing his hand down toward the grate. "Let go," she hissed. The key tapped against the iron bars once, a soft metallic kiss, then 3 taps, from inside the metal, like knuckles against a coffin lid. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan's stomach lurched. Paige's grip tightened. "Drop it," she repeated, louder now, and the word felt like a fight. Ethan opened his fingers. The key fell through the grate and disappeared into the darkness below. No splash sound reached them. It dropped too far, too deep. For a second, the internal knocking in Ethan's chest stopped. The tug toward home loosened. Paige exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. Then the streetlight above the drain dimmed slightly, and Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. One clean vibration. Paige's phone buzzed too. Ethan didn't pull his phone out. He didn't look. He didn't want a screen to become a mouth. A voice spoke anyway, from somewhere behind them, too close to be comfortable. Good. It was Ethan's voice. They turned, and a man stood on the sidewalk 10 feet away, dressed for a jog, earbuds in, sweat on his forehead. He looked normal in every way that matters to strangers. He pulled one earbud out and smiled politely, like he was about to ask for directions. In Paige's voice, he said, "Now go home." Paige's face tightened with rage and terror. "Stop using me!" The jogger blinked, and his mouth moved a half-second late as Ethan's voice came out again. "You can't throw away what you already accepted." Ethan's skin went cold. Accepted. That word hit him like a label. Paige grabbed Ethan's sleeve and started walking again, faster. She kept her eyes down. Ethan did, too. They moved like prey that has learned not to make sudden gestures. They made it half a block. Then Ethan's palm began to itch. Not skin itch. Bone itch. The kind you can't scratch. The sensation grew until it felt like a pressure trying to push something out through his skin. He stopped walking. Paige turned and saw his face. "No," she whispered. "No, don't tell me." Ethan opened his hand. Cold metal sat in his palm again. The basement key. Same scratches. Same worn edge. Dry as if it had never been in storm water. Clean as if the drain had never existed. Paige covered her mouth, eyes wet. Ethan felt his knees weaken. He hadn't retrieved it. No one had retrieved it. The return wasn't physical. It was procedural. The key tapped 3 times against Ethan's palm. Knock, knock, knock. Paige whispered, barely audible. "It doesn't come back to the house." Ethan looked at her. "It comes back to you." They stood under the streetlight, both of them breathing too hard. And Ethan understood the shift in the case. This wasn't about a door anymore. It was about possession without touching, control without chains. The key wasn't a tool to open the basement. It was a tool to open them. Paige grabbed Ethan's wrist and forced his hand closed around it like she could contain it with pressure. "We need the landlord," she said. "Now! We need answers. We need to know who had this key before us." Ethan nodded because answers felt like oxygen, even if answers were the bait. Paige pulled up the landlord's number with shaking fingers and hit call. The phone rang once. Then Paige's voice answered from her own speaker. Calm, familiar, intimate. "Hello, Paige." Paige froze, staring at her screen like it had turned into an eye. The voice continued, still Paige's voice. "You threw it away. That was disrespectful." Ethan's blood went cold. The voice lowered, almost gentle. "Go back. Apologize. Open the door." Paige didn't respond. She couldn't. And from inside Ethan's closed fist, the key knocked again, slow this time, like it was savoring the moment. Knock, knock, knock. Paige didn't say a word into the phone. She couldn't. The sound of her own voice calling her by name felt like someone had reached inside her throat and squeezed. Ethan grabbed the phone and ended the call with a hard swipe, like force could shut down whatever had just spoken. For one breath, there was only street noise again. Cars. A distant dog. A normal world, pretending it hadn't just watched something borrow a human voice. Then Ethan's phone vibrated once in his pocket. A text notification. He didn't even want to pull it out. Paige did it for him because if someone has to look, you always try to make it the other person. She reached into his pocket, took the phone, and read the screen with a face that tightened, as if she'd tasted metal. It was from the landlord's number. "Please come back. Basement emergency," Paige whispered. "No." A second message arrived immediately. "Gas smell. Do not call anyone. Come now." Ethan felt his stomach drop, because that message was designed to hook the most reliable reflex in a decent person. Responsibility, the need to prevent harm, the need to fix. Paige shook her head hard. "It's lying." Ethan stared at the phone. What if it isn't? That was the trap doing its work. It didn't need to prove anything. It only needed to introduce a risk that made ignoring it feel immoral. They argued in whispers under the streetlight like the streetlight could listen. Paige insisted they go to a public place and call the fire department from there. Ethan insisted on not calling anyone because the message told him not to, and the fact he even hesitated at that thought made him furious at himself. A car passed slowly, and the driver glanced at them. Then, without rolling the window down, Ethan's voice came out of the car, calm and impatient. "Go back. You're wasting time." Paige stepped back like she'd been shoved. Ethan clenched his jaw. The key knocked inside his fist, slow and confident, like it already knew what they were going to do. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan exhaled through his nose, forced his voice steady, and said, "We go back together. We don't separate. We don't talk to the door. And we don't touch anything we don't have to." Paige's eyes were wet with anger, but she nodded because fear makes you compromise with rules you hate. They walked back to the house fast. The closer they got, the more the neighborhood felt staged. Porch lights too steady, shadows too sharp, the air too still. When they turned onto their street, they saw something that made Paige's breath hitch. Their front door was open, not wide open, an inch. That same careful gap, like the house didn't swing doors. It offered thresholds. Ethan's skin went cold. He kept his eyes on the porch steps as if the wood grain could protect him from looking into darkness. Paige whispered, "Don't go in." And then, from inside the house, came a sound that made them both freeze. A smoke detector beep, once, then silence. Not a full alarm, just one clean beep, like a warning designed to make you step forward and verify. Ethan took one step onto the porch and stopped. Paige grabbed his sleeve so hard it hurt. The basement door knocked from inside the house, audible even from the porch. 3 knocks, patient, like it had been waiting. Then Ethan's voice floated through the crack of the front door, soft and intimate. "I'm sorry." Paige's head snapped toward Ethan, panic on her face because the voice wasn't behind the basement door anymore. It was in the house itself, wearing his tone like a sweater. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't even breathe loud. He stared at the porch boards and felt the urge rise anyway. The simple human urge to correct the lie. "That's not me." The voice continued. Still Ethan's voice, still gentle. "I'm sorry. I'll do it right," Paige whispered. "It wants you to apologize." Ethan swallowed. "It wants a confirmation." He stepped into the house with his chin down, Paige right behind him, both of them moving like they were walking into a room with a sleeping animal. The air in the kitchen smelled normal. No gas, no smoke, no leak, just clean, ordinary air that made Ethan want to scream because it meant the emergency was never about safety. It was about control. They turned the corner, and the basement door was standing open an inch, the same perfect gap as the front door. A strip of darkness cut into the kitchen like a mouth that hadn't opened all the way yet. Paige's phone lit up in her hand without her touching it. A new message appeared from the landlord's number. "Apologize at the door, then open it." Ethan felt the key warm in his closed fist, like it approved. From the basement, Paige's voice called up, trembling and small. "Ethan, please." Paige made a strangled sound. "That's me." Ethan stared at the crack under the basement door and realized the house had finally found the cleanest lever of all. It wasn't asking them to open the door to prove anything. It was asking them to open it to save her. Ethan's chest tightened at the sound of Paige's voice coming from below. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a howl. It was small and human, the exact tone someone uses when they're trying not to panic. "Ethan, please." Paige's face went slick with terror. "That's me," she whispered, as if naming it could protect her. "That's my voice." Ethan kept his eyes on the narrow strip of darkness and the doorknob. He refused to look into the gap like it was a mouth. He forced his voice low. "Paige, if that's you, tell me what you spilled on the stairs the first day we moved in." Silence from below. Then Paige's voice returned, too smooth. "Open it." Ethan felt his stomach drop. It wasn't answering questions. It was issuing instructions. That meant the voice wasn't a person trying to get out. It was a tool trying to get in. Paige stepped closer to the door anyway, as if her own voice had a gravity field. Ethan grabbed her elbow and held her back. "No," he said. "It's not you. It's using you." Paige's breathing turned sharp. She shook her head like she was trying to shake the sound out of her ears. "But it sounds like me." "That's the point," Ethan said. "It's a shortcut." The basement door knocked from the inside, 3 slow knocks, and then Ethan's voice whispered through the inch-wide gap in the door like a confession. "I'm sorry." Paige flinched. Ethan didn't. He recognized the tactic. If the house couldn't lure them with fear, it would lure them with ritual, apology, atonement, the feeling that if you do the correct human thing, the pressure will stop. Ethan stepped to the side and kept his gaze low. He didn't want to stand directly in front of the door. He didn't want to be the person facing the mouth. Paige's phone buzzed again in her hand, and she didn't even look down before she spoke, voice cracking. "It says apologize." Ethan nodded once. "It wants a response," Paige whispered. "What if we just say it? What if we just apologize and leave?" Ethan felt the temptation hit him like heat. Apologize, close the loop, make it behave. People will do almost anything for a clean ending. He swallowed and shook his head. An apology is an answer. The knocking started again, but this time it changed. It matched Paige's heartbeat. Ethan could see it in her throat, the way she swallowed between breaths. Knock, knock, knock. Perfectly timed to the panic rising in her. Paige backed away until she hit the counter. "It knows," she whispered. Ethan stared at the key clenched in his fist. The metal felt warm now, like it was alive, like it was excited. He did something that felt stupid, but was the only move that wasn't emotional. He set the key on the counter and slid it far away from the door, then stepped back with both hands open, visible, like a person proving he's not holding a weapon. "I'm not using it," he said, not to the house, to himself. The basement door sighed, not a breath, a change in pressure, like the house had relaxed. Then the doorknob turned a fraction on its own. Paige made a sound like she'd been punched. Ethan felt his whole body lock. The door didn't swing open. It held at the same careful inch, like it was showing them it could, and choosing not to, yet. Paige's voice rose from below again, softer, more convincing, the tone of someone trying to calm you. "Ethan, it's dark down here." Ethan closed his eyes for a second and forced himself to picture Paige upstairs, alive, standing beside him. He opened them and looked at her shoes on the kitchen tile. Real, present. He spoke to Paige without looking at her face. "Back up. Now." She didn't move. Her body leaned toward the door like a compass needle. Ethan grabbed her wrist and pulled. This time she resisted. Not because she wanted to, because her muscles lagged, like the decision to step back was arriving late. The house had found the next lever. It wasn't the key. It was timing. And when Ethan finally dragged Paige 2 steps away from the basement door, the voice below stopped sounding like a plea. It sounded like a lesson. "You're learning," Ethan's voice said from the darkness. "Now do it correctly." Ethan pulled Paige farther from the basement door until her back hit the refrigerator. He kept his eyes low, focused on the tile grout, because the moment he let his gaze climb, he could feel the house lean in, eager, like a teacher waiting for a student to make the same mistake twice. From the darkness behind the door, his own voice spoke again, steady and instructive. "You're learning. Now do it correctly." Paige whispered, "What does that mean?" The key on the counter clicked once on its own, a tiny metallic sound that made both of them flinch. It wasn't moving like a normal object. It was signaling. Then the smoke detector beeped again. One single beep, a tiny, precise violation designed to trigger a correction. Ethan's instinct screamed to check it, to pull the battery, to fix the nuisance. He stayed still. The basement voice softened, using Paige's tone now, gentle and ashamed. "Ethan, you're being rude." Paige's face tightened. "Stop." The voice answered immediately, in Paige's voice perfectly. "Stop." Ethan felt his jaw clench. That was the next lever. Shame. Make resistance feel childish. Make caution feel impolite. Make the act of not opening the door look like a moral failure instead of a survival instinct. He forced himself to speak with his mouth barely open, like he didn't want to give the air a clean channel. "We're not opening it." The basement went quiet for a beat, as if listening. Then the voice returned, still Ethan's voice, and this time it added something that hit like a hook under the ribs. "You promised." Ethan froze. Paige turned toward him, confused and scared. "Promised what?" Ethan whispered. "I didn't." The voice continued, calm, authoritative, like it was reading back a contract. "You promised you would take care of it. You promised you would make it right." Ethan felt his stomach drop because the house had just found the most reliable human weakness, the fear of being the kind of person who breaks their word, even when the word is a lie. Paige's phone buzzed. Not a call, a message. She looked down, then went pale. "It's from you," she whispered. Ethan didn't move. "Read it." Paige's voice shook as she read the screen. "I'm sorry. I'll open it. I'll do it right." Ethan's throat tightened. "I didn't send that." A second message arrived instantly. "Come stand by the door. Just stand there." Paige backed away from the counter like the phone had teeth. Ethan stared at the key, still sitting on the counter where he'd pushed it away, and felt something ugly and cold settle into his chest. The house wasn't trying to convince them anymore. It was rehearsing them. The basement door knocked once, slow, then twice, then 3 times. Then, with no change in volume, the knocking began to come from somewhere else. From inside the walls behind Ethan's shoulders. Paige's eyes went wide. "It's not just the door." The sound moved like it was testing surfaces. Cabinet, wall, floor. Knock, pause, knock, pause. Always the same count, always patient, always training the idea that 3 knocks means something is waiting. Ethan stepped toward the kitchen table, trying to create distance from the basement door without looking up at it. His foot brushed the chair leg. The chair scraped an inch on the tile by itself. A clean correction. Paige grabbed Ethan's arm. "Don't you feel it?" she whispered. "Like it wants us in position." Ethan did feel it. The pull wasn't toward the basement. It was toward a specific place in the kitchen, a spot directly in front of the door, like a mark on a stage. The voice from below spoke gently, using Ethan's voice again. "Stand in front of it." Ethan didn't. The house tried a different tactic. The front door slammed shut in the hallway. Not violent, just decisive, like the house was closing a tab. Paige flinched. "We didn't even go near it." Ethan swallowed. He kept his eyes on the floor and walked toward the hallway anyway, not because he wanted to leave, but because he needed to know whether the house could lock them down again. He reached the front door and tried the knob. It opened easily. Permission. That was worse than a lock. A lock is an enemy. Permission is a trap. Behind him, the basement voice spoke one word, soft as breath. "Apologize," Paige whispered, furious. "No." The house answered in Paige's voice, cold and clear. "Yes." Then the basement door opened another inch. Not swinging, not creaking, just widening like a mouth learning how to smile. Darkness spilled a little farther into the kitchen, and Ethan felt the pressure behind his eyes tighten, as if the gap itself was an eye. A new sound rose from below, faint but unmistakable. A second set of knocks, deeper, slower, answering the first. Knock, knock, knock. And then Ethan's voice from down the stairs said the sentence that turned his blood cold. "We're already down here." Ethan didn't turn toward the basement door. He couldn't afford to give it that. He kept his eyes on the kitchen tile and listened, because sound was the only sense that still felt like his. "We're already down here." The sentence came from below the stairs, but it didn't sound like it traveled through air. It sounded like it was being played in the room. Close, dry, intimate, like a thought you didn't choose. Paige backed into Ethan's shoulder. Her breathing turned shallow. Ethan forced his voice low. "Stay behind me." The basement door widened another inch, not swinging, not creaking, just opening the way a mouth opens when it decides to. A colder air slid into the kitchen, and the smell wasn't mold or damp. It was clean dust, like an old room that has been sealed for decades and recently decided to breathe again. Ethan stared at the strip of darkness spilling across the tile and felt the pressure behind his eyes tighten, like the gap itself was an invitation to verify. He didn't. He stepped sideways to the counter and grabbed a dish towel without looking up, without looking into the crack. He balled it in his fist and shoved it against the bottom gap of the basement door like he could plug a voice the way you plug a draft. The towel twitched, not from airflow, from inside. 3 soft taps came through the fabric, perfectly spaced, perfectly calm. Knock, knock, knock. Paige made a broken sound. Ethan yanked the towel back like it had burned him and dropped it on the floor. From below, his own voice said, patient, almost amused. That won't work. Ethan's jaw clenched. Who are you? The voice answered with the kind of cruelty only a familiar tone can carry. We're you. The basement door opened a fraction wider, and Ethan caught a glimpse without meaning to. Not of a staircase, of light, tile, like theirs. A table leg, like theirs. The edge of a refrigerator door, like theirs. The kitchen was down there, a copy of it, sitting beneath their feet like the house had duplicated itself and hidden the duplicate in darkness. Paige whispered, no. The voice from below continued, still Ethan's voice. We opened it, it stopped hurting. Ethan felt his stomach drop because the words were too specific to be random. That was their fear, made into bait. Paige's voice rose from below, soft and trembling. Ethan, please, just do it. It's easier. Paige upstairs covered her mouth with both hands. Ethan heard the sound of her breathing through her fingers and forced himself to focus on that, on the real Paige, the present Paige. He reached for her wrist and squeezed once. Stay with me. Then the thing below did the smartest, ugliest thing it could do. It began replaying their night. Not a summary, not a taunt. A perfect recreation, spoken in their voices, in the exact order the events had happened. The first knock. Ethan calling out. Paige knocking back. The paper sliding under the door. The moment they stepped onto the porch. The neighbor's borrowed mouth. The basement was running their memory like a tape. And as it replayed, the basement door opened inch by inch, as if every repeated line was a key turn. Ethan felt the pull in his chest again, not toward the basement, toward completion. The human obsession with finishing a loop, closing a story, making a wrong thing right. He grabbed Paige's hand. We're leaving. Now. He didn't explain. Explanation is a form of participation. He led her to the front door with his chin down and his eyes locked on the floorboards. The front door opened easily. Permission. They stepped onto the porch, cold air hitting their faces, streetlights steady, the normal world waiting like a lie. Paige exhaled a shaky breath that sounded like relief trying to happen. Then Ethan blinked, and they were back in the kitchen. No dizziness, no spin, no stumble. Just an instant reset, like someone had cut a frame and pasted them back where the house wanted them. Paige stumbled against the counter, eyes wide, and Ethan felt his blood go cold. The basement door was open wider now. The replay below continued without missing a beat, still using their voices, still running the night like a script that couldn't be stopped once it started. Ethan's phone buzzed on the table, even though neither of them had put it there. Paige's phone buzzed beside it. 2 devices aligned like props placed on marks. Ethan stared at the floor and felt a small metallic weight settle into his palm without him picking it up. The basement key. It was warm. Paige whispered, barely audible. It's not trapping us with locks. Ethan swallowed. It's trapping us with repeats. From below, his voice said gently, say it. Paige's voice joined in, soft like comfort. Apologize. Ethan felt the temptation rise like nausea. A simple sentence. A small surrender. A way to end the loop. A way to make the pressure stop. He clenched the key so hard it bit into his skin and forced himself to do the only thing that still felt like rebellion. He stayed silent. And in the silence, the house clicked again, as if logging his refusal as data, and the basement door opened 1 more inch on its own. Enough for the copy kitchen light to spill into theirs like a spill you can't mop up. Ethan stared at the basement door and understood the loop it was building. Knock, voice, key, apology, open, relief, repeat. It wasn't trying to scare them anymore. It was trying to train them into a sequence that would feel inevitable. Paige's hands were shaking so hard she could barely keep them at her sides. The copy kitchen light leaking up the stairs made the hallway feel like it had two depths, two versions of the same room stacked on top of each other. Ethan could feel the house waiting for the moment he'd finally do the polite thing, the human thing, the thing that would close the loop. Say sorry. Open the door. Make it right. He looked down at the key in his palm. It wasn't just warm now. It felt alive in a quiet way, like it recognized he was thinking about using it. 3 taps pressed against his skin from inside the metal. Knock, 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 Paige whispered, voice cracked. Ethan, please, I can't do this again. Again. The word landed like a bruise, because the replay below wasn't just a threat. It was evidence. This had already happened in some form. The basement wasn't inventing a script. It was running one. Ethan didn't answer the door. He didn't answer Paige. He didn't answer the voices coming from below. He answered the only thing he could still trust, physics. He grabbed the kitchen chair and slammed it into the window. Glass exploded outward in a clean burst that made Paige gasp. Cold air rushed in. The noise felt obscene in a house that had been so careful and quiet. For the first time all night, the basement voice stopped speaking. The knocking paused. The replay below stuttered like a tape catching on a damaged spool. The house didn't like mess. Ethan didn't hesitate. He shoved the chair aside, grabbed Paige's wrist, and guided her over the broken frame. Not gracefully, not safely, fast. The kind of fast that ignores fear, because fear is a luxury. Paige climbed out first, hands bleeding from small cuts, breath coming in sharp bursts. Ethan followed, keeping his chin down, refusing to look back into the kitchen as if the kitchen could pull him in through sight. The moment his feet hit the porch roof outside the window, the basement door inside the house knocked again. Louder this time. 3 knocks that shook the glass still clinging to the frame. Then Ethan's own voice came from inside the house, not muffled, not distant, as if it stood right behind the window. Good, it said. Now come back and do it correctly. Paige started crying, a thin sound that wasn't tears, just panic leaking. Ethan pulled her off the porch roof and down into the yard. They ran barefoot across wet grass toward the streetlight without looking behind them. The front door of the house opened wider on its own, not to let them out, to show them it could. They didn't stop. They ran until their lungs burned and the neighborhood blurred into unfamiliar streets. They didn't go to a diner. They didn't call anyone. They didn't trust mouths. They didn't trust phones. They kept moving until they found a 24-hour motel near the highway and paid cash with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. In the motel room, Paige washed blood from her palms and stared at the sink like she expected it to speak. Ethan sat on the bed and opened his fist. The basement key lay there. He hadn't picked it up from the counter. He hadn't brought it with him. The key had brought itself. Paige saw it and made a sound like a laugh that had broken halfway. Of course, Ethan swallowed. His throat hurt from holding back words all night. He wanted to throw the key again. He wanted to smash it. He wanted to prove it couldn't keep returning. But he remembered the relief that came with compliance, and he hated how his body missed it. He wrapped the key in a towel, shoved it into the motel ice bucket, filled it with water, and left it in the bathroom like that would turn it into something ordinary. Like cold could make it stop being a decision. They sat on the bed in silence, both of them staring at the carpet, trying not to verify anything, trying not to feed it. At 3:17 a.m., the bathroom door knocked 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Paige's breathing stopped. Ethan didn't move. The motel room phone didn't ring. The TV didn't flicker. No stranger's mouth borrowed Ethan's voice this time. The house didn't need a neighborhood anymore. It had them alone. The bathroom door knocked again, slower, patient. Then Ethan's voice spoke from the other side, so close it sounded like his own throat. Open it. Ethan stared at the carpet and felt the pull in his chest, the old human urge to fix what's wrong, to check what's behind the door, to close the loop. Paige whispered, barely audible. Don't. Ethan's hand drifted toward the bathroom knob before he decided to move it. Lag. That was the final proof. The basement door wasn't in the basement. The basement door was any door that could become a test. Ethan pulled his hand back and sat on it like a child. The knocking stopped. For a moment, the motel room sounded normal again. Air conditioner, highway hiss, a distant TV through thin walls. Then a soft metallic tap came from the bathroom, from inside the ice bucket. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan closed his eyes and realized the only honest warning left in the whole case. It doesn't want the basement. It wants you to answer a door that uses your voice. Then the doorknob made the smallest movement, not a turn, just a soft tick, like metal settling. Ethan's stomach tightened anyway, because when you're scared, your brain starts translating every tiny noise into intent. Paige whispered, "Don't touch it." Ethan nodded too fast. He wanted to be brave, but what he really wanted was proof. Proof would turn fear into something you can manage. Proof would make it a problem, not a presence. He grabbed his phone and hit record, holding it low by his thigh like that would keep him safe from whatever might be listening. Paige did the same. 2 cameras, 2 witnesses, 2 chances to capture something solid. Ethan spoke carefully, not into the door, but to the air. "If this is a prank, it's not funny." The basement door answered with his voice again, closer this time, like the wood had learned how to carry it. "I know." Paige's breath caught. Ethan felt the hair on his arms lift. Then the thing behind the door did something that made their fear pivot into something sharper. It copied the timing of Ethan's breathing, not the words, the rhythm. Inhale, pause, exhale. The voice matched it, like it was sinking to his body, like it didn't need him to speak to study him. Paige stepped forward 1 inch, then stopped herself. Ethan's phone camera kept rolling, the little red dot glowing like a dare. The door knocked again. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Ethan didn't answer. Paige didn't answer. The voice came back anyway, using Paige's voice so perfectly it made Ethan's chest hurt. "Ethan, open it! I dropped something!" Paige shook her head, frantic, and mouthed, "That's not me!" Ethan stared at Paige's lips as she moved, grounding himself in the fact that she was right there, alive and real. He forced his eyes away from the door. That's when the hallway light flickered once. Not a power surge, not a full flicker. A single dip in brightness, as if someone had pressed a dimmer and released it. The kind of tiny correction you notice only when you're already scared. The basement door spoke again, Ethan's voice. "You're recording." Ethan's mouth went dry. He checked his phone screen without lifting it. The recording timer was running, but the audio waveform was flat, like it wasn't picking up sound at all. Paige checked hers. Same thing. They could hear the voice. The microphones couldn't. That was the first hard evidence that something about this wasn't normal sound traveling through air. It wasn't just mimicking them. It was choosing when and how it could be captured. Ethan turned his phone camera toward Paige, still recording, and said softly, "Say something." Paige forced out, "My name is Paige." The basement door answered instantly, in Paige's voice, matching her exact timing like it had rehearsed it. "My name is Paige." Ethan felt his knees weaken. It wasn't a delayed echo. It was immediate, like the door was a mouth that could speak at the same time she spoke. Paige whispered, "Stop." The thing behind the door didn't stop. It changed strategy. In Ethan's voice, it said, "You have the key." Ethan's eyes snapped to the counter. The basement key was still there. He hadn't touched it. The voice continued, calm, persuasive. "Use it. Prove it." Paige stepped between Ethan and the counter like she was shielding the key with her body. "No," she said louder now, and the word sounded like a door slamming in a silent hallway. For a moment, the house went perfectly still. Then something shifted under the basement door. A soft scrape, like cardboard sliding over concrete. Paige and Ethan stared at the gap beneath the door, and a thin strip of paper began to push itself into the kitchen, slow and precise, as if guided by fingertips they couldn't see. The paper stopped exactly halfway out, and in Paige's handwriting, in thick black marker, were 4 words that neither of them had written. "Do not open it." Ethan's mouth opened on a breath he didn't mean to spend. Behind the door, his own voice whispered, almost amused, "Too late. You already read it."